Mm-hmm. It is good. Hello. Hey. Now we're back to normal.
Hang on. I lost audio.
Okay. Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
How's that?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we're back. All right.
And I did not get those cheeses from Tennessee, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm flying blind, and you're gonna carry the load on that one there.
I know. You're gonna get them at 9 o'clock tonight. So
Okay.
unfortunately, I don't know if we want to amend this or just let it go.
I think we just be honest, and I'll just hand it. I'll let the other experts handle the cheese.
All right. I'm ashamed. It's a shame that we don't have that. Hey, I haven't
What does
got
it look
your
like?
PowerPoint.
Can I? What's that?
I don't have your PowerPoint.
I sent you. Okay, I'm gonna leave you for a second. Check my mail. Where's your Wi-Fi connection? I didn't.
All right.
I'm going through my email quick. I gotta connect to Wi-Fi.
All right.
It'll definitely be room temperature.
Exactly. Yeah, it'll be good.
All right. We're going live. All right. So here we go. And your slides are up. So you just let me know when you want them up. Okay.
Sure.
All right. Here we go. Welcome everybody to Cheese in Depth. I'm Michael Landis, and today we are in session number 3 with Basil Hayden, and I want to welcome again my friend Adam Harris. Adam?
All right, Michael, thank you again. It's nice to be back here in week 3 with our Basil Hayden and Cheese program that we've been offering all of September, which is, of course, if you've been following along, Bourbon Heritage Month. So I'm very excited to be celebrating the entire month long. But also, as we've been going through these many weeks here, hopefully we've been inspiring you all, inspiring you to look at bourbon and rye a different way, not just pigeonholing it into some more traditional pairings, like with slow cooked meat. Not that there's anything wrong with a little bourbon and barbecue. It's two of my favorite things. But, taking a different approach, taking a step back and trying out different bourbons and seeing where the versatility can kind of lead you and your inspiration for pairings. And as we approach this holiday season, as I've said a few times, there's no better bourbon for entertaining than Basil Hayden. And we've spoken about Basil Hayden, our bourbon. Last week, we got a little bit into our rye and the inspiration that we've had for some of the innovations moving forward as we start to have fun with Basil Hayden, always keeping it approachable, always keeping it at that 80 proof. So it's great to share, complements food very well, especially cheese, I think. And it's a great stable bourbon to have throughout any time of the year, but definitely throughout the holidays. So as we've moved through the portfolio, we've talked, of course, about everything. The one that started it all, this Basil Hayden 80 proof. This is a small batch bourbon from the small batch collection at our distillery in Claremont. Of course, that's the Jim Beam Distillery, where we've been making small batch bourbon longer than anybody else. We have an extra shot of rye in here, which has really kind of attracted people to that elegant spice that Basil Hayden is known for. And so as we started to play around with some innovative, different flavor expressions, we kind of gravitated towards rye. Next week, you'll see another bourbon pop up, but we're going to speak to 2 different ryes this week. And we have really, if you've had the opportunity to go and prepare yourself and get some of these bottles, these are still out there with some limited availability. They came out as limited time offerings, but you can still find them on the shelves sometimes if you're lucky. And we're going to talk about the Basil Hayden 2x2 rye, which is one of my favorites of what we've come out with lately. And then we have our Caribbean Reserve rye, which is a really unique rye whiskey overall. So what we're going to start, if Michael, you could go ahead and start taking us through the slides there. Of course, we'll revisit our warehouses, where you see all of the warehouses in Claremont, Kentucky that are aging anywhere between, say 20,000 barrels to over 50,000 barrels. And those barrels can be, of course, bourbon mostly, but there's some rye barrels in there as well. We make that Kentucky style rye, which is going to have that 51% rye and approximately 51% rye, because like bourbon has to be at least 51% corn to be considered a bourbon by law, rye has to be at least 51% rye to be considered a rye whiskey by law. So we have some rye resting in there as well. And it's going to be that Kentucky style rye, which is going to give us a good amount of spice. Of course, you know, some good full flavor. And let's go ahead and check out those barrels. There those beauties are. They weigh 53, or they're 53 gallons, weighing about 500 pounds when they go in the warehouse for aging. And then every year they start to lose about 4% of the angel share, depending on where they're stored. So anywhere between 2 to 4%, 4 being on the high end. What we have here, the first whiskey that I'd like for you all to try, if we can move forward there, is going to be the Basil Hayden 2x2. And why do I like this rye so much? Well, you know, you might have kind of guessed that I'm a bit of a bourbon guy, even though I do enjoy a little bit of rye. This rye here is very unique in the fact that we blend 4 different whiskeys together. The base is going to be a blend of 2 unique ryes. And what I mean by unique is different age-stated rye. So even though we're not disclosing the age statements on the ryes here, we have 2 unique straight ryes that go into the blend. And then the minority is going to be brought in and made up of 2 unique bourbon profiles. So all the same mash bill. We have our traditional bourbon mash bill making the bourbon component of this blended rye. And then we have the majority being the same Kentucky style rye mash bill to make that majority blend. So what we're really going to focus on here as far as the aroma and the flavor goes is this really nice balance of spicy and sweet coming from the rye, providing that spicy note that we're looking for. And again, Kentucky rye is known for that spicy component that you smell in your nose. It's going to be kind of floral and grassy and spicy, maybe a little bit herbaceous. And then you're going to get a really great complement of the vanilla and caramel notes that you would find as the hallmark flavors of bourbon. You know, we talk about with the Basil Hayden bourbon, with that high rye mash, you do get a lot of the rye aroma and rye flavor, but you definitely, in the more secondary flavors and aromas, you're going to get those true oak notes that bring through those hallmark bourbon flavors and aromas. But here you have a really great balance of the two. So it's not like digging in to get a little deeper to find the bourbon, but the bourbon and the rye really kind of hit you at one time. So the tasting notes are up there if you'd like to follow along. I have this fantastic 2x2 at 80 proof. Again, Basil Hayden is always 80 proof, so we can bring everybody in with an approachability, let people come and enjoy the party a little bit longer with us. We have that nice honey color here. And with the aroma, like I said, you know, you're going to get a great balance of both what you expect from a bourbon's aroma, but also led by that rye spice. And for those of y'all that have been following along, we're going to go ahead and give this the Kentucky Chew. Now, that chew is going to coat your palate. You're going to be able to appreciate the flavor of this Basil Hayden 2x2. And then by smacking on my lips, I'm able to bring across the finish. And this is a nice lingering finish to me. So I think that this is very warm. It's a great rye as we sort of start to settle into the fall in a lot of places around the country, not where I am right now. But I hope you guys enjoy this if you're able to find some. Again, this is one of my favorite innovations that we've done with Basil Hayden over the years here since we've been expanding our guests to the party. And I'd like to kick it back to Michael and our friends down south of Tennessee to talk about the cheese that we're going to pair with the 2x2 here.
I'm really happy to be able to bring on our cheese expert, our cheese maker here. This is Padgett Arnold, and I'm going to give her an opportunity. She's going to introduce herself and talk about our first cheese that we're going to pair up. Padgett?
Hi, thank you so much, Michael and Adam, for including us and our cheeses for this tasting. I'm Padgett with Sequatchie Cove Creamery, and we make cow's milk cheeses at Sequatchie Cove Farm, which is just outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And we make 8 different varieties of cheeses. And what we're tasting today is, I believe up first is the Walden, which is our newest cheese, and it's a soft ripened, sort of a mini Reblochon style. It's a really creamy texture, very light, pairs well with all kinds of things. And I have to admit, I have not tried it. It's our newest cheese, so I haven't really explored a whole lot of pairings with it quite yet. And I'm pretty partial to wine myself, although I am definitely a fan of bourbon. But I haven't tried it with any whiskeys or bourbons. So this is kind of my first my trial run here with the Walden, and I actually went out looking for the ryes that we're pairing these cheeses with. In my local area, I cannot find them, but I did find the classic 80 proof. So I picked up a bottle of that, and so I'm enjoying that with the Walden. But like I said, this is our first pasteurized cheese. We only aged this one about 3 to 4 weeks. It's very, very different from the other cheeses that we make, which are all unpasteurized milk and aged quite a bit longer. And so it's kind of the far opposite end of the spectrum as far as our cheeses go to the in comparison to the blues that we have, the Bellamy Blue and the Shakerag Blue. So which I think the Bellamy Blue will also pair very well with the 2x2. Yeah, so this is the Walden here. For those of you who ordered the tasting kit, and we very appreciate that that support. The first cheese is the small format round wheel, and Adam, I'm just very embarrassed that your cheeses did not arrive on time for this tasting.
I'm going to do my best to imagine, I promise.
I really hope that you'll be able to enjoy them ASAP with the whiskey.
Certainly. Just be very descriptive in the way you talk about the aroma and the flavor, and I'll pull from my own experience, memory, and I'll make it happen. I'll imagine.
Well, I think that the Walden is really, it's got a very buttery, it's sort of just like the overtone, you know, the first thing that you taste is just butter, and it's light, but it's got a richness to it. And then it's also very earthy. There's a very nice sort of mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, and cultured butter. That's kind of the, you know, where I think it leads my palate anyway. But it's got a really nice clean finish, not very lingering. Unlike the blue cheeses, I think they have a much longer finish. So, and I don't know, Michael, what you have in mind for the Bellamy. If we want to kind of compare and contrast how these two pair with the 2x2, we can also do that with the Shakerag on the other whiskey that we're tasting.
Yeah, we can. I want to say that the two rye, one of my favorites. I love the grassy notes of it, the way that really comes out, but it's not like you're sucking on a piece of grass. It really has that sweetness to it. There's a kind of a little hint of maltiness in the back. And with the Walden, we get all that butter. And then of course that rind being a little bit of mushroomy, that earthiness in there really brings out some more maltiness of the bourbon. And so it actually becomes a little richer and fuller, and you really pick up the buttery notes, and the buttery notes kind of change from just like a slab of butter to like a clarified butter, just really sweet without any of that heaviness to it. So it's a very well balanced little pairing here. I really enjoy this, and I think that it has enough of the flavors together to be able to keep it into a really nice, simple pairing. Nothing overly complicated, something that you can just grab and do this. It doesn't have to be a fancy occasion for this. It's that easy.
Right. Right. I agree. Yeah.
There were some words that you were using, Padgett, that I was picking up, and the way that I feel. And Michael, I'm glad you mentioned kind of the mouthfeel of the viscosity of this particular rye, and that is because of that nice bottom note that the bourbon provides. But a lot of the tasting notes that you were saying, Padgett and Mike, I was kind of imagining them, and it like almost like sort of like ice cream sort of thing started coming to mind, like the way that they would combine to kind of create like a butter pecan sensation or something like that, that really kind of would be an awesome taste experience to have that pairing. So,
Right.
yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, there's definitely like a walnutty kind of, I think it's walnuts, but everybody's palate is different, but that's what I really pick up, with this Walden, between the shiitake, the butter, and sort of a walnut on the finish. And it does really work nicely with this whiskey. And the whiskey also cuts the fat, of this.
Yeah.
This is definitely kind of a fatty cheese.
I think that's a big part of, that's one of the things I don't think we've really discussed enough, is kind of having that proof, and how that helps to, you're not just weighing yourself down with this cheese tasting, you're able to kind of cut through that to really sort of just enjoy the next bite as you kind of work your way through, which is just, you never want to bring it back to home entertaining, you never want to like weigh your guests down. So being able to have that, a lot of people, like you said, you're a wine drinker, a lot of people want to drink a big bodied red with their cheese, or adjust accordingly, obviously. But I think it's a don't miss the opportunity to have a 80 proof bourbon with that cheese, because something like, Booker's at barrel strength, that'll definitely overpower anything it's going to be with. But 80 proof is just really nice, flexible, and still able to do what it needs to do.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. It's excellent. It's a really good starter.
Yeah, for sure.
When you mentioned about pecan, as I retasted it and thought about that, and it's definitely a buttered pecan, but it also brings out a little bit of saltiness. So it's like a sea salted butter pecan flavor that runs across it. Really unique. Not quite at the dessert level, because it has some earthiness in there that's savory in that fact. So very, very palatable and very nice to be able to just enjoy on a whim.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I feel like the sweetness is going to come like that butter pecan. You're just sort of like expecting like the sugar note, but you don't get that. So it's kind of nice, because then you really stay less overwhelmed. Your palate doesn't get too satiated.
All right.
I like the more grown-up ice creams that you can have the option with now that aren't too sweet anyway. So it's nothing wrong with scratching the sweet tooth every once in a while, but I do like those more. They go more for the flavor than just the sweetness of ice cream. Not to start talking about. I'm not an ice cream expert. I'm just an ice cream fan.
I understand. I agree.
I've never found an ice cream that doesn't go with bourbon.
I was just about to say the same thing.
All right. So Adam, let's go ahead and step into the next bourbon.
Absolutely. This is going to be a rye again. So if you don't mind going to that the tasting notes so people can follow along. The story with this next rye, our Basil Hayden Caribbean Reserve rye. I love the blue color of the label here. Just a real fun rye that we released 2 summers back. What we've got here is a blend of, you might have seen from the title slide, we're talking about a bourbon, rye, and rum. We talked about bourbon and rye with a 2x2, and this is where the rum comes in. So we're going to stick with rye. We are only rye in this particular whiskey. We have a nice blend of an 8-year-old Kentucky rye, which is from our distillery, obviously. And so a nice extra age rye there. And then we're going to have a component of a 4-year-old Canadian rye. So you might remember from when we talked about the dark rye last week, that I like to say that we have this really great blend of the spiciness that the Kentucky rye is going to provide, complemented by the fruity notes that come through with the Canadian rye. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to add some blackstrap molasses rum. So blackstrap rum, if you don't know, has a really deep, rich, dry, earthy, saline note, but also is like syrup on your pancakes. So it's very complex. It's got a little bit of funk to it, and I mean that in the best way. I think cheese fans understand good funk versus bad funk, right? And so it's got that really cool flavor and that really rich viscosity as far as a rum goes when you're talking about that blackstrap. So what we do is we add a little bit of that to the whiskey, to those 2 ryes, and we let that blend. And what we get here, again, we don't want to do a barrel finish. We've actually tried barrel finishes with both with the port edition. We tried to do with the dark rye, we tried to do a port barrel finish. Here we tried to do a blackstrap rum barrel finish, and it just never really gives us a flavor that we want. It's a little bit dry. I think sometimes you run the risk of becoming a little bit over oaked. And we want to still be approachable, as I've always been talking about, but really kind of let the flavors that we're using, the different spirits that we use, kind of flavor the whiskey in not just equal parts, but in a way that really complements either the rye or bourbon base. So here we have at 80 proof our Caribbean rye, and you'll notice it's got a little bit of a darker color than say some of our other Basil Haydens, and again that's going to be because of the blackstrap rum addition there. And when you give it a nose, it is a very deep, rich molasses note with a lot of the rye spice in support of it. So you really do get a lot of molasses. And you might think that this is going to be a very sweet whiskey, but again, kind of talking about grown-up ice creams, you know, we make grown-up whiskeys. And so what we want to do is we don't want to make it sweet. Of course, there's an opportunity for sweet drinks if you'd like, but we want to keep our bourbons really with the authentic flavors of the whiskey that we're using and also the spirit that we're using. So when we give it a taste here, again, as you've heard me say, you know, you always look to see if the flavor delivers what the aroma promises, and I think that we got that here. But also we have, it does kind of finish quickly. So I think that this is going to be a really great pairing for the blue cheeses, because you're going to have a big rush of flavor that's going to probably match what you're going to get from the blue cheese pretty evenly. So there's going to be a nice balance. But I think with that quick finish, you're going to be able to really enjoy the creaminess of the blue cheeses. And I think kind of that bite that a blue can have will really kind of allow the sweet component of the molasses the blackstrap rum to kind of go all the way to a pretty long finish, I'm going to imagine. So I think this is going to be a great pairing. I'm looking forward to catching up with it later, but I'm going to turn it over back to Padgett and Michael, and they're going to really talk about the pairing for you.
Hang on just a second. We got a question from
Sure.
Sarita, which is, at what stage is the rum added?
So it's going to be after both the ryes have been matured. So we'll bring some of our Canadian rye down from our friends up there to the distillery in Kentucky. We will then blend all 3 liquids together. So we've got the 2 ryes. The majority, again, is always going to be a Kentucky product. So we have the majority that's going to be the Kentucky rye with that 8-year Kentucky rye with the 4-year Canadian rye, and then the blackstrap rum is added there, and then that will be brought down to a proof, which will then be bottled at 80. Great question. I'm glad someone chimed in on, I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, please ask me to clarify and I will. But the fact that we did have a question out there does remind me, we forgot to do this last week. So this week I'm going to give away 2 Basil Hayden cheese boards to anyone who types a question in or pipes up and says, hey, we're having a great time. I've attended all 3 of these sessions so far. So we'll make up for last week, and I'll give away 2 boards that I'll mail out towards the end of September, early October. So if you want to type in, and Michael, if you want to manage that and just let me know who's going to be the winner of the cheese boards, I'll get those out in a couple of weeks here, 3 weeks.
All right. Now there's a second part. Sarita asked, is there any additional aging post blending?
Great question. And the answer is simply no, there's not.
All right. That makes it easy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for the questions. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to turn it back over to Padgett on our next cheese.
All right. So the next cheese that we have, or the one that I've chosen, and I believe that I'm right. Okay. Yes, it's the Bellamy Blue. Thank you, Michael. So this.
I love this cheese. I know this cheese.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad to hear it. The Bellamy is a little bit lesser known than the other blue cheese that we'll be tasting, but and I think it's a great one to start with this pairing. I've just been tasting it with the Basil Hayden 80 proof that I have, and it's an awesome awesome pairing. And I'm telling you, Adam, I just listening to you talk about this, the Caribbean, I really got to get my hands on a bottle of that.
It's super cool. If you can't find it, let me know. Maybe
Yeah.
a little something will
I
show
don't,
up.
I don't know if I've got some friends that have a liquor store in Chattanooga, and maybe I can, pull some strings with them, but I've got to get my hands on some of this. It's just, it sounds so awesome. But the Bellamy Blue is our cave aged blue. So I'm just kind of holding it up so you can see it's not the one wrapped in the leaves, but the other blue. The way that we ripen this, it's a Roquefort based recipe. So sort of a French style blue. And then we rub this cheese a few times with applewood smoked sea salt as it's just beginning to ripen. And before the rind starts developing, we give it a good rub down with the smoked sea salt. And then we leave it alone and we let it develop a rind, sort of natural rind development, cave age, just kind of let it grow. It's only aged about 3 months versus the other blue, which is aged easily twice that long. But the Bellamy is a little bit more straightforward. The smoke is very understated. It's not overly smoky. It just gives it a little bit more depth of flavor. And I think that just brings, a little bit of an interesting note to, tasting Bellamy without being overly obviously like smoky or, it's certainly not a smoked cheese. And I really like this description that somebody came up with along the way. Bellamy is somewhat like smoked oysters meets boiled peanuts. You've got a lot of savory notes, but then you have this mineral, very distinct kind of mineral tone to it that I think is kind of, where the smoked oysters come into play there. But it's just a really nice, very opposite side of the spectrum as far as the two blues that we're tasting. This one's very sort of dry and mineral and savory, very, very much on the salty end of the spectrum. The other blue that we're going to taste is very much on the sweet end of the spectrum. But yeah, so the Bellamy.
If you don't mind.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Cheese enthusiast, certainly not a cheese expert, but when you coat the cheese in salt, do you do it to a point where the salt begins to pull moisture out of the cheese, or is that like too far down the line? You're just getting a little bit of
right. We definitely
think about curing a ham, right? You think about curing a ham and out of there.
There's definitely, that's not the intention. My husband, who's actually the cheesemaker, is standing right behind me.
Getting a snack.
The idea is definitely not to pull moisture away from the cheese. We want this to be really creamy, dense, fudgy texture. So we changed our recipe for Bellamy a 3 years ago, I guess now, where at one point we were ripening it in wax. We would rub it with the smoked salt and then coat it with wax and try to, preserve as much of that moisture as possible in the aging process. And then we would age it quite a bit longer.
I say I would extend the process, right?
But we'd also age it at a colder temperature. Once it was in the wax, it would go into a much colder room. But now we keep it in the aging room, which is about 50 degrees. So it's more, in the cave. And just developing a natural rind alongside the tome, which is another natural rind cheese that we make. So they share the same aging room and sort of the environment, and all the microflora in there. So yeah, and we really want that kind of cave age nature, that characteristic to come through, but we have to be careful about leaving it in there too long because the moisture level can drop too far and start to dry out. So at a certain point, once it's developed that rind and really had a sufficient amount of time to sort of ripen to a key point, then we cool it down. Then we put it in a cold room and it will continue to age and ripen and develop and slowly break down, which is really where you get a lot more complexity with the flavors in blue cheese. If you ripen it really fast, it just goes straight to ammonia. In order to really develop blue cheese and have like those beautiful flavors and all the different subtle components, ripening at a cold temperature is pretty key, at least for the cheeses that we make.
Yeah.
So but the Bellamy, like I said, it's only aged about half as long as the Shakerag, because it's not as well preserved in its aging environment. And so there's a fine line between, like letting it go too far and having some of that moisture depleted to where it's taking away from, the finished product and the tasting experience. But
Yeah.
Michael, when we did another sort of like an overview of our cheeses, we did a little video about a month and a half ago, and he immediately said, when we were tasting the Bellamy, just sort of as a general tasting and talking about it and pairing it, he just, identified that like instantly, like this is a cheese that we need to pair with the whiskey in September.
Awesome.
So that's kind of what got the ball rolling, I think, with this idea. So I haven't actually stepped to the next cheese, and so I want to make sure that we go in the appropriate order. But before I jump into the next blue cheese and start talking about it, Michael, please, what are your thoughts?
Well, the Caribbean version is magnificent. It's that molasses on the back end of this is just so distinct, and it is just beautiful. It really does accent and enlarge the flavor of the Basil Hayden rye. So you really get it's just magnificent. It's wonderful. So, all right. So it's
a really cool whiskey, I think.
Yeah, with the cheese, it's so nice to have the earthiness, the mineral that comes through. Yeah. There's a saltiness, there's a buttery, there's a tanginess, all of that. But what it immediately does is it neutralizes any of the alcohol in this and gives you a vanilla flavor in place of that. So you get the backstrap, you get the molasses, you get the vanilla, and then the cheese kind of comes in with this buttery flavor with a little bit of tanginess, and the rind is not as mushroomy. You're not getting that from the blue as much as you are this interesting sweetness. There's a little crunchiness to it, but it's just a rich, buttery flavor. All of these flavors work really well. I would never believe that I'm tasting a blue when you put these two together, because it kind of changes its complete flavor characteristic into more of a Brie-ish blue, flavor.
Wow.
A lot more of the buttery flavors come out. It's very nice. It's very rich, but it's unusual in that respect of having all those flavors come together. It's a magnificent pairing. Really nice.
That's cool. Yeah, I think this whiskey is, and it's a screwball. It's an oddball, and I mean that in the most positive way. We gotta love our oddballs, right? It's just got something different about it that brings out different flavors, and again, you kind of think it's going to be this sweet, syrupy thing, but then it has that nice, just that minerality, that dry, salty quality. It's a really cool oddball of a rye, I think.
It works perfectly with this cheese. I can't wait to see what we're going to do next, because this allows you to be able to really take a stronger cheese and mellow it out, or to be able to mellow out the Basil Hayden. It's really really great, really well done. Yeah. All right, so let's hop on to the next one.
All right, so the last cheese, the third and final, is our most popular cheese, hands down, across the board, Shakerag Blue. And this is what we do with this cheese. When we sort of developed this, we were very much inspired, and I definitely want to extend credit where credit is due to Rogue Creamery with their Rogue River Blue, and their amazing combination of Syrah grape leaves and pear brandy. And so we are big fans of that cheese, and we're in Tennessee. And so we're kind of in whiskey country here, and we wanted to come up with a way to create something along those lines, like a leaf wrap blue that has a very boozy richness to it, but something that's very much grounded and rooted in the South, and particularly here in Tennessee. And so we came up with the combination of whiskey and fig leaves. And so we wrap the Shakerag Blue with fig leaves after they've been marinating in Chattanooga whiskey for a number of weeks or months, extended period of time. And so it's quite a labor-intensive cheese to produce. It's very much seasonal in its production, sort of a cyclical production pattern where we are at this moment, the tail end of September, we're at the tail end of our, well, I guess this is mid-September, but the tail end of our fig leaf harvesting season. So we're gathering as many as we can while they're still looking good and still fresh, because we're actually going to get a little cold snap this weekend, which I'm excited about, but that's going to take those fig leaves downhill really fast. So I'm kind of scrambling. This is like my last week, but we'll gather anywhere from like 30 to 50,000 fig leaves every year and submerge them in Chattanooga whiskey. And we have a great relationship with Chattanooga whiskey. They are the first whiskey that's been distilled in the city of Chattanooga since Prohibition. And they have a great product, and they're located right in downtown Chattanooga, and their distillery is there. And so it's awesome to be able to partner with them and create this product. But I think it's also going to lend itself quite well with the Basil Hayden. So I still haven't tasted it. I can't wait to try this combination. But so we take all the fig leaves at the end of the summer, we submerge them in whiskey, and then they are preserved in that whiskey for the better part of the next 12 months. And we'll work our way through those leaves very slowly as we're finishing the cheeses. So the Shakerag is made similarly to the Bellamy Blue the day it's made. It's another Roquefort-based recipe. But then once it's in its aging phase, it goes in a completely different direction. There's a certain amount of rind development, but we don't let that go very far before we take the wheels and coat them in wax. And then they are aged in a very cold temperature for an extended period of time. So the Shakerag has at least 4 to 5 months, but more often than not, it's like 6 to 8 months old before it's released. And I think the longer it ages, the better it gets. Just the more broken down and creamy and just like amazing the texture gets. So it's aging.
Do you get more flavor of the whiskey in the fig leaves, or do you get more flavor of the whiskey in the cheese itself?
Well, the fig leaves are soaking in the whiskey, so they're sort of absorbing that. But then once we after the cheese has been aged at least 4 months, then we take the wax off.
Okay.
And then we take those fig leaves that have been down in the whiskey and we wrap them on the cheese. And then we vacuum seal it. And we also kind of just, there's a lot of whiskey kind of liquid in there with the vacuum seal. So it kind of forces the whiskey into the wheel of cheese. And you get this, there's a really nice play between the flavors of the fig leaves, which is very sort of a tropical coconut, botanical herbal kind of thing. It's, very distinctive, and I think it's flavor, but it's really more aroma influence, the aromatics of those leaves. And then the spice and vanilla notes of the whiskey. And then, so there's an interplay between those two components. And then once you wrap those leaves on the wheel and vacuum seal it and then let it sit for several more weeks, in the vacuum seal, is sort of marinating the wheel with the fig leaves and the whiskey. The end result is pretty fantastic. It's very special.
What is that? That's super cool. I gotta help you find a bottle of this.
Yeah,
you said coconut, and I'm like, we gotta find a bottle.
We've got to match these two up.
Yep.
So without any more further ado, I think we should taste the whiskey and the Shakerag. And I'm so sorry, Adam, that you don't have some cheese right now. Oh, it's killing me.
You described it perfectly, though.
It's gonna be really good together for sure. Yeah. Wow. It really, the whiskey really takes the cheese, I feel like very, very strongly to the, like where the influence is coming from the whiskey rather than the fig leaves.
Mm.
Like with the, when I, and I, it just sort of depends. Like this is a batch that's not terribly old. It's on the young side of the spectrum. And also the leaves that it's wrapped in were only soaking in in the Chattanooga whiskey for a shorter period of time, because we, you know, it's kind of a cyclical thing where we start to run out of leaves and then we start collecting them again. And then we start wrapping the wheels more quickly, you know, so the cycle sort of tightens up this time of year. And generally when I taste the cheese, I just get the fig leaves and I'm lacking the whiskey influence, you know, when I'm just tasting the cheese. But then when you pair it together, it changes the whole spectrum of flavors. It's,
awesome.
you know, wipes out the overbearing fig flavor. Not that there's anything wrong with that fig flavor, but there's a balance going on with it all. And but yeah, and again, I don't have the Caribbean on hand, so I'm not getting the full effect. Michael, what do you think?
That was very graceful.
You know, when we tasted this before, we talked about it being a little juicy fruit.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's so fruity and sweet.
It does have a lot of tropical fruit to that, and that is its predominance in its flavor characteristic. So it does okay with the Caribbean. It's nice, but it brings out a little bit of the alcohol heat to it. It's not overly distracting, but when I tried it with the 2x2, it was off the charts wonderful, because
Okay.
I think that the sweetness of the molasses overwhelms or just pushes all of that juicy fruit, that tropical fruit too far,
Right.
and it becomes a little hot. Whereas the 2x2, the rye, is magnificent. It balances everything out. It drops down the tropical fruit to this really nice, you know, where we got the pecan and the butter before. Now we have this really interesting tropical fruit, maybe a little bit of mango, something like that, that's got that sweetness to it. And it really just balances out, takes away any of the heat. And again, we get that vanilla back in. So it's kind of the fig comes out a little, or yeah, the fig comes out a little bit, vanilla comes out a little bit, butter comes out. So I think it's a little bit better that way, even though it's not bad with the Caribbean. I think that if I was going to pair it, and Adam, when you do this, you'll really like it with the 2x2. So kind of go back with that.
Don't think I'm not onto you right now. I'm onto you, Michael. I know what you're doing. You're trying to make me try to find a bottle of both of these ryes for Padgett. I get it, and probably an extra one for you.
I would
I'm on you, man.
gladly place an order for one of each if I could.
But this is all three of these cheeses do really well with the bourbons. You can't go wrong any way that you take these, whether or not you start off with the first one with the 2x2, or then you go with the Caribbean. They are very interchangeable. I tried the Walden with the Caribbean. It works really well. Really pick out more of that richness. It adds in a little bit more of that molasses that comes in the background. You really kind of get all those little flavors that just really play around. So no matter which way you go, it works really well. You know, and it's just, these are great cheeses that pair up with this very well.
Awesome. Looking forward to catching up.
Yeah.
Did we have a second person chime in for a cutting board, for a cheese board?
Hang on. Let me take a look at it. Looks like we may have another one here. Chasing it down. Yes, we do.
All right.
Ah, it's our friend Carrie again. She says, forgive me, I don't know much about fig leaves. Are they intended to be consumed with the cheese?
Yes. It's really a matter of preference. The fig leaves are edible, certainly, and I eat them, but they can easily sort of just be peeled away. And then what you end up with is more or less sort of a rindless blue, but you're still going to get all the flavor. You're not missing out too much on, the full effect of the Shakerag if you prefer not to eat the leaves, but they are totally edible. And as is the rinds on the other cheeses as well, which I didn't really specifically mention that, but all the rinds on our cheeses are edible. They're natural rinds. It's more or less just an extension of the cheese itself, with the exception of the Shakerag, which is a wrapped blue, but the wrapping is edible. So you don't have to cut any of it off. But I always say, it's just a matter of your preference.
Yeah, there are people that are not really into the rind on the soft ripened bloomy rinds, and so you basically work with the paste on that. But they complement each other. There's always a flavor characteristic in there. I tried it with the fig and without the fig and the pairing was probably just a little better with the Caribbean with the rind, with the fig leaf on there. Because it adds a little bit more of the structure that it needs for this. And it also tones down that juicy fruit, the tropical fruit a little bit. So every point that you take with these, you're gonna get a different characteristic. In other words, if you were to do just the paste with the bourbon, it's gonna go one way. If you add the rind, it's gonna go another way. And so your direction will be based on where you're adding in each of the flavors. So, if you try it and you don't like it, try another part of the cheese, try it without the rind, try it with the rind, because it'll give you different experiences. That's the beauty of cheese. And again, as you taste the center of the cheese going closer to the rind, you're going to get a variation of the flavor as well. So each way that you go through there. So you should be able to find it. But overall, all three of them work really well with both of the bourbons.
If you're at a party and all the cheese has just been eating the center out, you know what kind of party you're at, right?
Well, that would be purchasing the Bishop's Cut, which is the center cheese. There are cheese places that do that. They sell just the Bishop's Cut. So
wow.
That is something. But, the beauty of cheese is that it has so much to offer in variations of its aging. We both know that in 2 weeks, this is going to be a very different cheese than it is today. Just because as it matures and we get more buttery flavors and all of that, we're going to get a little bit more stronger, a little bit more buttery. So, we'll get maybe a little bit nuttiness out of it as it matures. So we'll get all those variations, which is beautiful with the cheese.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned that, because we have with these three cheeses, we're sort of in the very young, and then sort of in the intermediate, and then the very aged spectrum. So with the Walden, it's extremely young, and even for Walden, because the Walden has grown in popularity just recently, and we're very excited about that. Our sales have accelerated a bit. So the cheese that I had available this week was pretty young. So we're just on the very beginning, I think, of the window of ripeness on that Walden. So like Michael said, in a couple of weeks, it's going to be even better than it is right now. It's got at least, I'd say, 4 weeks of sort of the optimum window of ripeness before it gets, over the hill. And then with the Bellamy Blue, we're, like I mentioned before, this is a fairly young Bellamy Blue. We keep it younger than the Shakerag, but Bellamy can range anywhere from 90 to, I'd say, 120 or maybe 150 days old. And this is definitely much closer to the 90-day point. So this is a little less broken down, a little more, I'd say, young texture. It just doesn't have the melt in your mouth texture to it quite yet that I really love that the Bellamy gets, but I'm still enjoying this a lot with the whiskey. And then the Shakerag that we have, the piece that I'm enjoying is very juicy. I mean, it's sort of sitting on this cutting board, and and there's liquid just coming out of the bottom of it. It's very, very messy and juicy, and quite often with a wedge like this, we wrap it in cheese paper. By the time it is wherever it's going to its destination, once somebody receives it, the whiskey is sort of, seeping through the paper. And it looks a little disturbing because it's sort of like this brown liquid that's coming through. But I just tell people, that means it's good. Like, you got a good
one. Like, ooh, you got a good one.
Like, that's what you want. You want it to look like that, like if it's all dry and that paper looks really pristine, like, you didn't really get it. But anyway, this batch is very, like, it's just juicy. And that's the way that it should be. But the Bellamy is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. It's
if they get one with the dry paper, should they let it rest a little bit longer? Kind of give it one month or so?
Well, no. Once it's cut in a small piece, you typically, it's just going to get drier and drier.
Yeah.
The longer that you let it sit, unfortunately in the refrigerator, like a piece of cheese, it'll just become more desiccated over time. But and it's okay. There's the paper may just be holding in the moisture in adequately instead of leaking through. But if it is leaking through, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong or overripe about the.
Gotcha.
So, but yeah, and I really love that we added the Walden to this. Originally, we were just talking about, we got really excited about the blues and the pairing of the blues, but then Michael decided that we should include Walden, and I think that was a really smart choice because it just adds like a perfect balance where you can kind of go back and forth. And then, if your palate starts getting a little bit overwhelmed, the Walden will sort of take you back to, like the center point again. And which I think is really important for extended tastings. If you're just going to be like enjoying cheeses and beverages over time, you kind of have to have that something that's sort of, cleansing the palate a little, or just,
Sure.
balancing out, all those intense flavors that you can just.
There's one thing I've learned over the last several weeks and couple of months is that Michael Landis knows his cheese.
Yeah.
And he knows his whiskey too.
I listen. What he has to say, I listen to, and I consider myself a student of just cheese tasting and cheese pairing and understanding all the interplay and how to even predict what's going to be good together. I'm still a little bit of a newbie on that, and so very much pay attention to Michael's opinion and tips and his ideas. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And we have some more questions. This is for Adam. Is the Caribbean Reserve rye readily available as they want to try it with the blue cheese?
Yeah, it's not. This was a limited offering. Again, kind of teed it up in the first episode or our first session here, was that a lot of these whiskeys that I'd be bringing might not be readily available anymore. So, you might be able to find some of this on the shelves out there, depending on where you might be, but it's not something that we're stocking. This came out in the summer of 2018, so it's been a little while, but I've seen a couple of bottles out there, so you never know. You might look out.
All right.
Friends with the liquor store, they have like a room in the back where they keep very special bottles of bourbon.
That's right.
So maybe they've got some in the back room. I didn't.
What's you got in the back? That's the best question to ask at a liquor store. What's you got in the back?
Question.
Yeah.
All right. Padgett, this is for you. As you work your way through the fig leaves, do you notice a difference between the first wrap versus the ones wrapped later after the leaves have been soaked longer?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. The longer they soak, and I think it comes a point where there's sort of diminishing returns, but what we are working with right now is on the front end of, we always let the leaves soak at least a month or longer. So they've been in the whiskey a good long while, like 4 weeks or more. But, it'll easily kind of just speed up and accelerate to where those leaves have been in the whiskey 3 or 4 or 5 months, and that definitely makes a difference. I think it's, you know, it just brings about more influence from the whiskey, and which is what we want. And so we, you know, we try to be careful and sort of maintain a balance. This time of year being tricky because sales in the fourth quarter, as we're approaching October, starting to accelerate, and we see a lot of holiday sales associated with the Shakerag Blue. We're really trying to keep it from, you know, getting too young, where we're, you know, leaf wrapping these things before the leaves are really ready, or, you know, before the cheese itself is actually ready to be leaf wrapped, because we don't want to shortchange the finished product. So that's, you know, it's a very good question. And yes, it's true. I think in the fall, the Shakerag is of one sort of end of the spectrum based on the seasonality of the fig and whiskey component. And in the spring and the late winter and early spring, you're kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, where you have cheeses that, number one, were aged quite a bit longer and breaking down longer in the wax, you know, in like a number of months before they even have the fig leaves on them. And doubly, those fig leaves have been in the whiskey several more months. And so you get, you know, in the spring and early summer, and that's not really blue cheese season, but that's when the Shakerag is, to me, it's like, that's the best, you know. The older it gets, the more amazing. So yeah, but we're trying to work with the seasonality of it and the elements that we have, you know, to work with at our disposal, and to create something as consistent as possible year round. So.
All right. So do you have anything else you'd like to say before we wrap it up here?
I'm just saying thanks again, and really loved it and enjoyed the pairings quite a bit. So I'll be on the hunt for some of that Caribbean Reserve for sure. It'll be a special item if I can get my hands on it. I'll save up for.
Get my email from Michael if you can.
What's that?
To get my email from Michael if you can.
Oh, okay. All right.
Your traditional routes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, give me some tips. Thank you.
Yep. And I'll just say thanks again to everybody that's kind of followed us on this journey during September. It's been a lot of fun to meet new friends and see my new favorite familiar face with Michael. And I'm just so happy to be able to have this opportunity to talk about whiskey and cheese. What could be better? You know, this is fantastic. So I hope we're inspiring. I hope we're keeping y'all entertained and educated about being able to taste amazing bourbon, rye, unique flavor profiles, and partnering with some of the coolest cheeses across the country. So I want to thank you, Padgett, for being here, and Michael, thanks for opening up this opportunity for us.
My pleasure. I want to thank you both for taking the time today, and how much I enjoyed both the conversation about the bourbons and also the love and the cheese. So it's a great day for Michael, you know, being able to sit here and enjoy both of these. So thank you both of you for that. And for those that are still on here, next week we will have David Gremmels with us with some Rogue River Blue. And for those that did the Bold and Brave, we'll have a 4-year as well. So we're going to be looking at, what is that? We got 10-year versions of the Basil Hayden next week?
Yeah, I saved probably the fanciest for the last installment. We've got a 10-year bourbon and a 10-year rye to try. So it should be a good one. Yeah. They're all good ones. There's not a better one, but it'll be a fun one to try the 10 years.
That's going to be a really good one. For sure. I'm get my hands on Rogue River too. So
yes.
It's in season. It's very exciting.
Well, we had some trouble because FedEx could not deliver out of Oregon, and so because of the wildfires, so we had to push off our release date from this week, the 22nd, or next week, the 22nd, to October 13th. So we'll be shifting that. But we're trying to expedite some cheese to me and Adam, and so hopefully that'll happen, and we'll be able to have David on, and be a nice wrap up for our Bourbon Heritage Month. So,
been a great month. Yeah, stay safe out there in Oregon, okay, David?
Yeah. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys. I really
All right,
appreciate
take care, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you.
today. So take care. You know, wear a mask, wash your hands, and be safe. All right. We'll see you soon. All right.
Bye.
Bye.